Welcome back to the show, everybody. I'm Dr. David Hooper, and today we are talking about hunger. Not the fake kind, not the kind people post about when it sounds good, not the version people use when life's going really well and they want to sound driven and motivated. I'm talking about real hunger, the kind that gets built when life humbles you, the kind that appears when your pride has taken a hit, the kind that gets exposed when your reality feels painfully small, but something in you still refuses to believe that this is how your story ends. Because there was a period in my life where, if I'm honest, things looked and felt a long way from where I wanted them to be. I've been made redundant. I've been on job seekers allowance, benefits. Confidence has taken a hit. My mental health's been very poor at times. I've gained weight at times. And I've often been trying to hold on to this sense that there was still more in me, even though my life at certain points did not really look like proof of that. And all of those different scenarios and experiences, they're quite strange places to be. They're strange because on one hand, you can still feel this ambition. You still want more. You still want to build. You still believe there's another version of your life available. But on the other hand, your current circumstances keep testing that belief every single day. Your bank account tests it. Your confidence tests it. At times, your body will test it. The environment you're in will test it. Your self-image, the thing that you see in the mirror, it will test it. And I think a lot of people know that feeling. Maybe not with the exact same details, but they know the feeling of being in a chapter that looks smaller than the life they believe they are capable of building. And what I want to do in this episode is talk honestly about what that season taught me personally. I want to talk about what it felt like. I want to talk about what not having the finances to build the businesses I wanted to did to my pride. I want to talk about what it taught me about pressure and trying to deal with pressure, which is not easy. And I think really diving into the difference between this fake made up hunger and a real hunger to succeed. I just want to make this so useful for you because there's a really nice phrase that I love, and it's when you've been hungry, you'll never know what it's like to be full. And that to me really hits home because I am starving for success, starving to be the best person I can, starving to go and achieve the things I know I'm capable of. But I wouldn't be as hungry as I am without all the crazy setbacks I've had. So I'm hoping that my struggles, my failures, my setbacks will help you skip out a few of those chapters and you can arrive at the point I'm at now where we're chasing our goals with everything we've got. So this is definitely not me playing the violin or reflecting on hard chapters in too much detail. Certainly not about me. I just want to give you something you can actually take away from this. The biggest lessons I learned and some practical things I think when it comes to being in these types of seasons right now, where your life feels smaller than you know it should be. And I think this is going to be a great episode because sometimes the season that humbles you becomes the season that makes you. And that's definitely been true for me. So let's dive in. I think one of the hardest feelings in life is when your present does just feel not as grand as the life you believe you're capable of being. That gap really hurts, and there's frustration there's impatience, there's disappointment, but there's also identity pain. And what I mean by that, it's waking up in a life that doesn't feel aligned with who you believe you could be. It's looking at your circumstances and feeling that quiet, constant discomfort of knowing this is not it. This is not the level you want to live at. This is not how you want to feel. This is not who you want to become. And I've definitely lived with that. When I first got together with my wife, Laura, I said to her that I was going to give her the world, give her a life she's never experienced before. And for a long time, that looked like the case. But then during COVID, we lost our business, had to start completely from scratch. We were in debt. We had bailiffs at the door. I was on job seekers allowance. I had to get a full-time job. And suddenly it was a huge shock to the system. And I definitely had those moments where I thought, wow, I'm not delivering, not only not delivering for myself, but I'm not delivering for my wife. And the promises that I made to her are not coming true. And that was very real for me. When I think back to that season in my life, what stands out most, not just the practical struggle, and it wasn't just the, oh, we don't have much money right now. It was much deeper than that. It was just this feeling that life had shrunk. Money ebbs and flows. It comes, it goes. Hopefully it'll come more than not. But when your life is shrunk, you just feel it everywhere. You feel it in your confidence, your routines, the way you look after yourself, the way you make the choices you make, the energy you hold, the way you carry yourself. And that was the difficult bit for me. It wasn't just the season, it was the pain that surrounded that. There's something very hard about looking at your life and knowing that your current reality is not just below your goals, but it's below your internal standard of what you believe your life should feel like. And that's a very uncomfortable place to live. And if you're in that season right now, I empathize with you completely. And I promise you that by the end of this podcast, you will have the tools and techniques to get back to where you want to be. I think on top of that practical pressure as well, there's also a level of shame that comes with it, certainly for me anyway. And shame is really heavy on you. There's embarrassment, there's comparisons, there's this feeling of not wanting to fully explain where you are because even saying it out loud makes it feel more real. Like I don't really still talk about First Step Lifestyle, which was that business that went bust during COVID, even though it wasn't particularly my fault. It's still that embarrassment of I had a business that didn't survive COVID. And there's no embarrassment around that really. It's just that my own personal perspective of, oh man, I wish I could have made that succeed. And it also isn't the way I thought that business was going to go. You know, we were doing some really great things, and then COVID hit, and suddenly, you know, the world falls away around you. So I really know that feeling. And I think that's partly why I was excited to do this episode, because when people look back on those challenging moments in their life, they often talk about them in a very neat and tidy way. They make them sound cleaner than they were. But while you're in them, it does not feel neat. It's exposing. And that's a good word that I would say sums up these challenging seasons. It exposes you. It exposes the gap between where you are and where you want to be, of how much your confidence was tied to your circumstances as well. It exposes your pride. It exposes your whether your ambition is deep or whether it only survives when life's easy. And for me, that season almost exposed all of that. I think that we skip over the reality of challenging times because we go straight from things were shitty to I rebuilt and everything's amazing now. But what does bad actually mean? So for me, it meant waking up with this low level heaviness already there. It meant not feeling good about myself physically. It meant not liking the way my life looked or not feeling proud about it. It meant having ambition still in me, but feeling very far away from any evidence that it was going to amount to anything. And that's the strangest tension because you can still have vision while feeling like your life doesn't match it in any way. And that tension can either create hunger or helplessness. And at times, certainly I found it created both. There were moments where I felt hungry and driven and motivated, where I felt like this isn't it. My journey's not over. There was more to be done. But there was also moments where I just felt worn down by it all. Pounded into the ground is a phrase I used to use quite regularly. And that's where those feelings of embarrassment, of deflation, where I felt life had exposed me in a way I didn't want. I felt like it wasn't fair. Why did this happen to me? What's the chances of a world pandemic happening 9, 10 months after I opened an in-person gym and the world got closed down? You know, I don't know what the chances are of that. This is the first time in my life that the world had seen a pandemic, that when it got locked down. So if I'd opened the gym 5 years earlier or 5 years later, who knows? So it was very easy to get the violins out and feel really sad and like the world was against me. And I think that is a very human response, and it gets missed. We deal with these things in certain ways. But I also think when we're in these challenging seasons, it's very human to fluctuate in terms of how you feel. Some days you feel determined, like, yeah, I'm going to dig myself out of this hole. I'm going to drag myself back up. But then there's other days where you just want to pull the quilt over your head and hide. Some days you feel clear. Some days you feel ashamed and angry. Some days you just feel numb. And that was part of my reality as well. And then being on job seekers allowance or benefits, for those who don't know what that is, it added a layer that really hit my pride. Now, I pay my taxes. There's no reason for me not to have got benefits because I couldn't get a job after my business closed. But it did hit my pride. I hated signing on the dole, as it's known, because I want to say it was kind of pride. And I don't know if it was ego had gone from having a business to signing on benefits. And that can sound like, oh, my ego's been hurt. And it had, but I don't think that's all it was. Sometimes your pride is tied to dignity as well, to you feeling capable of what you're doing, to feel like you're carrying your own life properly, like you're carrying your family and looking after them. And when you get hit hard, it does something to you. It makes you question that value, your position. You question how far you've drifted from where you thought you'd be. And that's a heavy thing as well. And I definitely found that. At the time, I was also dealing with physical and emotional consequences of how much I'd slipped. I'd gained weight again. I didn't feel good in my own skin. I didn't feel disciplined. I'd stopped working out. I wasn't living in a way where I was giving myself respect. And that's quite a brutal combination, because now it's not just the circumstances or environment that's off, it's actually you. And that's how I really felt in that difficult season. And that's when these seasons can be really dangerous if you're not careful, because the more uncomfortable and humiliating they feel, the easier it is to start letting them define you. And you start to think, maybe this is just who I am now. Maybe I've gone backwards. Maybe I've wasted too much. Maybe that bigger life was never realistic for me anyway. Maybe I was kidding myself. And that is where circumstances start lying to you. And they do lie. And this is key. Your circumstances are real, but they are not always telling you the truth about who you are or what is still possible. And that is a lesson I have tried to really absorb into my own life. Another danger, I think, when you're in a challenging season is that your current situation starts to try to narrate your identity, because if you listen to that identity, or you allow it to become your identity, you start to move differently. And what I mean by that is you stop thinking like a builder. You stop thinking like an entrepreneur. You stop acting like more is possible. You stop carrying yourself like someone who still believes there is another version of life available. And that's how you can get stuck for years, because you aren't incapable and you do have enough in you. But then the difficult season convinced you to stop behaving like your future was still open. And that was pretty close to where I was at. Not in kind of this dramatic way, but just almost quietly. It was. I had a lot of self doubt. I lowered my standards. I allowed myself to tolerate more than I should have tolerated. And that's just how it happens. I got a full-time job. I didn't try and start new businesses for a year or two. I got out of shape, stopped exercising, and almost backwards rolled into this life of mediocrity for a year or two. And that's why we have to just be really aware when we're in these challenging moments that these hard seasons have to be interpreted carefully. If you interpret them as evidence that you are now smaller, weaker, less capable, or less worthy, they will crush that momentum out of you. But if you interpret them as information, they can sharpen you and you can learn from these setbacks. And that's obviously a huge difference. Information will tell you this is where you are right now. This is what isn't working. This is what needs to change. This is exposing something. This is painful, but useful if I learn from it. Whereas identity says, this is who I am now. This is my level. This is probably all I'm getting. One keeps you building, the other keeps you trapped. And that distinction mattered enormously for me. And if I'm honest, I don't think I fully saw it at the time. I think I learned it in hindsight. But I can look back now and see that one of the most important things I eventually did was stop allowing that season to become a verdict. I had to start seeing it as this chapter in my life, a real chapter, certainly, but it was also a hard chapter and a humbling chapter. But it was still just a chapter in my life, a year or two out of hopefully, a long life. And that provides room to build again, which is all we want as entrepreneurs. So like I was talking about at the very start, there's a difference between fake hunger and real hunger. And I think this is something that really is important to me. Fake hunger wants the outcome. I'm hungry for more money. I'm hungry to get in shape or whatever it is. Whereas real hunger accepts the cost. Real hunger is all about changing your life to go and chase this dream. It isn't necessarily about the end goal. The real hunger is where you're sacrificing sleep, where you're taking giant risks, where you're putting yourself out there. That's real hunger. It's the ability to move away from the image of success and towards being uncomfortable and disciplined and patient and embarrassed and doubted and stretched, all on the way there. Because when life feels small, when things are uncomfortable, when your pride has taken a hit, when you're looking at your reality and not liking what you see, you very quickly find out how deep your ambition really goes. Do you still want more when wanting more means changing? Do you still believe in a bigger future when the current evidence is poor? Do you still move when there's no applause or guarantees or neat path? Because to be successful is not a linear process. It is not just up, up, and up. Absolutely not. It is literally a roller coaster. And a lot of that time, there is more downs than ups. There is a little up, but then there's grinding again and hard work, and then a little win, and then it's grinding again. And that's where that hunger becomes real. I think for me, at first, a lot of my hunger was emotional. It was frustration, resentment. It was wanting out of that current situation. It was wanting relief. And that's pretty understandable. But it wasn't enough. Because if all it does is make you agitated, it's not that useful for you. Real hunger becomes useful when it starts affecting your behavior in a positive way. I quickly realized that just because you want more, that's not enough. Or being annoyed with where you are is not enough. Or believing there was more is not enough. At some point, hunger just had to underpin your routine. It had to become your standards, your everyday behavior. It has to mean discipline and self leadership. And that also meant not letting the season just emotionally shake me without also letting it teach me. And I think a lot of people get stuck in that place. We want a different life and we feel the pain of the gap of where you are now and where you want to be. And there's a lot of frustration there and you're hungry emotionally, but we haven't turned that hunger into structure. And until we do that, the chapter stays painful without becoming productive. And that's really the difference. I think another thing that going through such challenging times taught me was about pressure. I think pressure is really strange. It can be a good thing and it can sharpen the senses, but it can also scramble you as well. And I've got to be truly honest here. I can experience both. It can overwhelm me, it can stress me, it can make me anxious, but it can also dial me in and really sharpen my instincts. I think when your life feels tight, your instincts lead to panic. You want things to move quickly. You want answers now. You want a way out now. And that can make you frantic. And frantic isn't the same as effective because for me, there was definitely moments where pressure made me feel like I had to fix everything at once. I had to sort my body out, sort my mind out, sort my future out, work my finances out, work out physically, work my identity out all immediately. And that kind of pressure is not always useful. Sometimes it just makes you emotional. I had to learn how to let pressure focus me instead of scatter me. And that meant a few things. Asking better questions, things like what actually matters most right now? What is the next real step? What deserves my energy? What is just panic talking? What can I control today? Those questions changed a lot because pressure by itself certainly isn't a strategy. It's just a force, and you still need discipline to direct it. And I think this is really important because pressure will either push you into frantic and focused movement or it will force you into sharper clarity. And that depends on how you respond. For me, that chapter taught me that hunger without clarity can still wreck you. Pressure without direction can still drain you, but you need both desire and discipline. And that was a huge part of my personal rebuild. If I had to narrow down that whole challenging season for me, where I lost my business during COVID, signed on job seekers allowance and benefits, got out of shape again, had mental health issues, had to get a full-time job, had to work a part-time job, a night shift job as well, it would be these three things that the season taught me essentially. So, firstly, your current circumstances are not your permanent identity. Being unemployed was real, as was being on benefits, as was feeling embarrassed by that, as was feeling behind as well. But none of that was my permanent identity. And that really helped because once you let your current chapter define who you are, you stop behaving like more is possible. And that is something we don't want. Like I've said, we stop building, we stop believing, we stop moving, and that's really dangerous. So that season taught me to say, this is where I am, but this is not who I am forever. And that is a very important line to hold. Two, wanting more means nothing if it doesn't change how you live. It's easy to say you want a better life. It's easy to say you know there's more in you. And it's easy to resent your current position. But if none of that changes your routine, standards, discipline, or behavior, then it is just emotional noise. That was the truth I had to face. Hunger had to become action, not dramatic action, just repeated action. And that is when it started helping me. Number three, hard seasons can either shrink you or sharpen you. That depends on what you let them produce. A hard season can make you more bitter, more passive, more defeated, or it can make you more honest, disciplined, focused, and more self-aware. It may do both for a while, but in the end, you still have a role in what it shapes in you. That was something that was really big for me personally, because once I realized I could let the season sharpen me, I started relating to it differently. So if you're listening and you are in your own version of a season like that, here's what we need you to do. Separate that reality from your identity. Your present might feel small, but that does not mean your future has to be. Do not let those circumstances narrate your long-term identity. Call the season what it is, be honest about it, but do not let it convince you that is the whole story. Then we need to use the discomfort to get honest, but definitely not hopeless. Pain can either make you more self-aware or more self-destructive. Choose self-awareness, please. Ask yourself, what is this season exposing in me? Where have my standards slipped? What have I been tolerating that I know is beneath me? What needs to change? And that makes the pain actually useful. Then let's turn that hunger into routine. Do not keep your hunger emotional only. Give it some structure. Keep promises, build routines, raise standards, do the boring things, behave like the future matters now, not later. And that is when hunger becomes something that can actually change your life. I would never pretend that challenging season was enjoyable. It was awful. It was hard, it was exposing, humbling, painful in ways I would not choose again and I wouldn't want you to have to go through. But I do have to acknowledge that it did give me things too. It gave me perspective and gratitude and less patience for excuses and a deeper kind of hunger and determination to succeed. It also gave me more respect for disciplined action. It gave me proof that I could build from a place that felt very far from where I wanted to be. Once you know you can rebuild from a low place, something really does change in you. You stop fearing those hard chapters in the same way because you've been through them before. You still feel them, but you stop assuming that they automatically mean the end. And that season taught me that. And maybe that is why I don't resent it like I used to. You know, I could quite easily sit here and say how amazing my gym would be now, celebrating 6 years. That's actually, well, it'd be 7 years, 7 years last month since I opened that gym. And I could easily resent that. But I've learned so much from that experience, I would not choose to do that. And that's kind of a different type of gratitude, I guess. Not pretending the pain was good, but recognizing that the pain forced a level of honesty and hunger that comfort just never would have. So if there's one thing I'd love for you to take from this episode, it's this. Some seasons humble you so deeply that they expose what is actually in you. And that can either crush your hunger or refine it. That season refined mine. It taught me that wanting a better life is cheap if it never changes your standards. It taught me that current circumstances are real, but they're not my identity. It taught me that pressure needs discipline. And it taught me that hunger only becomes useful when it starts changing how you live. So if your life feels smaller than you know it should feel right now, don't rush to decide that this is all that's possible for you. Let the season humble you if it needs to. Let it expose you if it has to, but do not let it finish you off. Use it. Let it sharpen your hunger and let it clarify what matters. Let it build the discipline and honesty that your next chapter is going to need. Because sometimes the season that embarrassed you is also the season that will build you properly. If this episode's resonated with you, I'd love it if you could share it with someone who needs it. Make sure you like and subscribe on YouTube or Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Remember, you can follow me at Dr. David Hooper on all of the social media platforms. Please feel free to slide into my DMs if you're enjoying the podcast or you've got any questions or topics that you want me to cover. And of course, until next time, stay unstoppable.